So I'm giving you a quick rundown. I just made a video with every step on how to change the power steering on this 2005 Dodge Grand Caravan. So I am by no means a master mechanic, and I was able to do it on my own. It did take a little bit of time. I was videotaping, which also slowed me down, so it would have been a little bit quicker without. So first thing that I did is I inspected all my lines to see if I had any leaks through my power steering hoses, and I couldn't really see any. They all seemed dry. I did know that the power steering pump had gone out. So the first thing that I did is I jacked up the car, put the emergency brake on, and I did put 2 jack stands up. I've already run it and tested it, doing this for example's sake. So I have my jack stand. I had another jack stand as well. I came under here, and on the return line there is a cooler, and I unhooked one of those and I was able to drain it from right there. Well, I was down here, I came over here and I unhooked this shield, which kind of blocks debris from getting up into the serpentine belt. And if you want, you can unhook your battery terminal. I did not. I'm gutsy. So when I was up top, I removed this vacuum hose here, set that to the side, then I came over, I removed this windshield wiper hose as well. I loosened up these 2 clamps with the flathead. After I had done that, I came over here and there's 2 clips on the air filter cover. I popped those clips off, pulled this boot off, and this hose was already gone. And then once this boot came off, I was able to lift up on this, and there's 3 little tabs on the back. You just pull it to the right and that pops out. I set that along with the vacuum tube there. So once that was out, I took the air filter out as well, looked at that needed replacing, so I replaced that. Once the air filter was out, there's this one bolt right here. I believe it's a 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter, I don't know. So I pulled that out, and then there was a rubber bushing that was holding it in. Just kind of wiggled it, that popped free. So I had the bottom, I had the whole air filter part out. I removed this other end of the boot, and you can see there's a clip back there, and it's a safety clip. You got to push that red clip out. Whenever you see one of the red clips, you got to push it to the other, pull it out or push it away or whatever. So I pushed that out and then pushed down on the tabs in the back, and that popped free, and then this boot was able to be removed as well. Once that boot was removed, there was a couple vacuum hoses here that are right under the boot. I pulled those out. Once that was free, I had those out of the way, tucked them around and brought them out of the way. I looked in there and I was like, there's no space at all for me. So I realized I was going to have to take off the windshield wiper cover. Well, this was draining. I came over here. My tank, this reservoir was totally empty, so I bought a new reservoir as well. I unbolted that, took that off, unclamped this one, and then there's a one over here in the back. So there's 2 return lines hooked up. So this big thick one in the back, I pulled that off and undid this clamp, unbolted this. This popped free, put the new one in, clamped it back down, bolted that, or clamped that one in. Then I went, followed that tube all the way to the back, unhooked that return line with a clamp back there, and line out of the way. Then the high pressure line, I used a open and wrench, loosened that up. I pulled the high pressure line out. Then I had loosened up my wheel. I had taken my wheel off, and then I could get in there and I could see the tensioner pulley. I pulled that down and I was able to loosen up my serpentine belt. Once that serpentine belt was loosened up, I was able to take it off. It was all cracked up, so I'd already bought a new one. Since I was down there and loosening it up, I figured I might as well replace it, and it was wise that I did. So with that serpentine belt off, I was able to look back here. Yep, no space. So there are 6 of these Torx head screws on here. So I took those 6 Torx head screws that are on this plastic cover to the windshield wiper motor cowling. So I took those off. I came over here on the windshield wipers. I had plastic clips. I popped those clips up with a screwdriver, and I believe it was a 15 millimeter socket. Loosened that one up, loosened the other one up. They were kind of corroded into place, so I took a hammer and lightly was tapping on it, and then I took a screwdriver and was prying up underneath it and tap, 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 and then I believe it was this one popped free, And then I went to the other one and I was trying to do the same thing and it was not popping free. So I tried turning the wipers on while I was doing that, and then the wipers went up about halfway and then they stopped because it popped free. So I was able to remove those wipers. I put those wipers inside the back of the minivan. Then I took this plastic cowling off. This was already unscrewed. I put that in the back of the minivan. There's a couple Phillips there's a little plastic thing here. It's a little clamp thing. It doesn't really hold that much, but it holds a little bit. So I had to undo those. But this whole thing went in the back of the minivan. Then there's the main piece. It's a lot heavier. It's metal and it holds the windshield wiper motor. So there's 4 bolts, one in the corner, 2 in the middle, and 1 on the other end. And I took those off, and once those were off, there are 4 nuts on the top. Took those off, and then I was able to remove the whole windshield wiper unit after I had removed this clip, which runs power to the windshield wiper motors. And again, that is a safety clip, so I had to simply just push that up, and then I was able to squeeze the back and pull it apart. So with that free, I took that whole assembly, put that in the back of the minivan so that wouldn't get damaged. Then I looked in there and I was like, okay, I got some space, but then the tubes that went into here for the venting, one on each side, those had to be popped off. So with those off, this one was in the way. I had to push it down and pry it out of the way. The air conditioning unit here was in the way, but I was able to get a, I believe it was a 13 millimeter long socket in there, and I was able to, you know, I was just moving that socket like, it was like 2 clicks, click, click, and it was hardly anything. But long story short, a lot of sweat, and I was cramped up, but it came free. So I popped that free. I slid it across. A lot of people say you got to slide it all the way to the back. Mine just slid right here and wiggled out right here. So I pulled that out, grabbed my new one, put on the new pulley. If you go to Napa Auto Parts, they have a pulley, or any auto store, they have a pulley installer. So you can rent this little kit. So well, you can check it out. It costs $60 as a damage deposit, but I get all that money back as long as I return it in 7 days. Inside here is the kit. So I use this, and I just bought a new pulley. So I tried to pull the old one off after I already put the new one on, and it was on there and just broke apart. So if you're not sure, buy a new pulley when you're buying everything so you don't have to go back to the store, and then you can always return it. So then I had that pulley on there. Once that pulley was in, I wiggled that power steering pump back through, and then I ran those bolts. And it's nice to have like a magnet. I had a few magnets in the car. When you have these magnets here and you lay them around when you're working, it's nice because you put those bolts right here and it sticks. Or you put screwdrivers there. I had another one over here. You put a screwdrivers or whatever, and you don't have to worry about them falling all over. But they have to be pretty heavy-duty magnets. So I put those bolts back in, and that was painstaking because you really got to be careful to make sure it's aligned, because it took me 3 tries. And it drives you insane when you get one in and you got to pull it out because the second one didn't line up correctly, and it's just a mess down there because you can't see, and it's a tight space. But I eventually got the 3 in there. Once those 3 bolts were in there, I made sure they were snug. I didn't want to over snug them because it was going into aluminum. On the power steering pump, there's a little elbow joint, so you have to remove that from the old one with an Allen wrench. So I removed that from the old one, put the new washer on that came with the pump on there, and put that back onto the new pulley, so that went down as well. So now with everything down there, I got the pulley screwed in. I put a new O-ring on. Did I say washer? I meant O-ring goes on to the elbow joint. I put a new O-ring on the high pressure line, and then I tightened that into place. Once that was tightened into place, I went under the car, got my serpentine belt back into place, pried down on the tensioner pulley, pop that into place. Once that was in place, then I put the vacuum lines back in, moved that tube back over here. After the vacuum lines were in, and the tube was in on both sides, then I got the lower unit to the windshield wipers. I put the 4 bolts on and the 4 nuts. Then I put the windshield wipers in. I highly suggest when you take the windshield wipers off that you run a piece of tape across the top so you know exactly where to line them up, so that when you reset them, because I didn't do that and it took me like 15 minutes, and you could have them reset in 2 minutes if you put a piece of tape there. So save yourself some time. So then I put these windshield wipers back on. Once that was on, made sure that all my tubes and everything was reset, put back into place, and I put power steering fluid in here, and I let it drain out the bottom, and I turned the steering wheel to drain the power steering lines to flush them. So back and forth, back and forth. This takes 2.5 pints. I had bought 4 pints, so I ran through the system. And once I had done that, I left my drain pan underneath. Once I had drained that through, then I went underneath, put the hose back on, clamped it all up. Then I refilled this, went inside the car, turned the steering wheel back and forth about 20 times, kept refilling it as I was going. First few times I came out right away, but every few times I come out and check it. And then after I pumped it and it wasn't really changing much, I started the car, turned it a few times, turned it off. Power steering pump sounded fine, so I didn't get too concerned about that and made sure it was topped off. Dropped the car to the ground, and then I backed it out, brought some power steering fluid with me, drove around for about 10 minutes letting the power steering fluid heat up. That level of that rose, and good. Got back, cooled down. It's all within the full level. Went underneath the vehicle, looked for leaks. I don't see any leaks under there. When I first started up the car, just because the power steering fluid had shot everywhere, as it heated up, I was getting a lot of steam. So I was a little concerned at first that I screwed something else up, but I'm just gonna run with it because I know I got everything else back on there, and I figured it was the power steering fluid just burning off the motor, which it was. So I let this run, checked everything out. It all seemed good, and we were good to go. Sorry it's a bit long, but that was step by step, and that was about as quick as I could go in one run. So hopefully this helps. If you want to see each step one at a time, check out my other video. And this is for a 2005 Dodge Grand Caravan, and I believe it's 2001 to 2007. And if you have any questions, please post them below.